The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Lunch and Learn series. We're up to Unit 5 today, so welcome wherever you are, and I hope you've had a great week, and of course have a great weekend as we come up to this weekend. So it was 2 weeks ago we had a chat in relation to one of the conversations, and today I want to talk about building commitment, which is a big issue in the workplace because lots of people talk about the issue of engagement levels in the workplace and getting people committed. In other words, following through and being accountable and responsible. So I want to talk about that today and give you some tips and hints on how you might go about that. All right, so the normal process, of course, is if you've got questions or any comments at all, just go to the question box on the right-hand side. You might have to open that little arrow there with the orange tab and go to question box and then type in your question. I'm the only one that gets to see the question, and the moment I see it, of course, I'll respond to it immediately. All right, so let's have a look at where we've come from and where we're going. Well, obviously we're getting towards the end of our program, but last time we talked about the concept of having vision and purpose and having those important conversations with people. In other words, explaining the why of work. So giving people some jobs to do and giving an explanation as to why that's important for them. It's very important. And I think, as I said in the 2 weeks ago, the reason people don't do that is one, time, because it takes a bit of time to have a conversation about the purpose of something. But the other problem with that is that it might also, there might be an assumption made on behalf of the manager that the person already knows, the rationale or the why, and that's not necessarily the case. So it's an important conversation to have, and I hope you've had a chance to practice that and look for those opportunities to just go that little extra and explain the purpose of why people are doing what they need to do. So today we're going to look, as I said, on building commitment and the conversations around that. So I hope you've been having a chance to go into the learning platform. I think it's really important that you do spend time there. That's part of the cost of this, in the sense that you can go in there and there's a whole lot of interesting materials that you can follow through on those things. It's very important. You'll also find, of course, a copy of the slides and the recording. Well, you won't get the recording because it's happening right now, but I'll be posting that up this afternoon, and I'll send you out an email this afternoon, let you know that. So that'll be uploaded, but there are a couple of exercises in there that I can't spend time on in our hour together, so that's the opportunity to go in there. And of course, the old adage, the more you put in, the more you get out. All right, let's look at what we're doing today. So ultimately, I want to talk about, the concept of encouragement. If you encourage people, does it actually work? I mean, if you are encouraging to people, does it make a difference, or is it just a waste of time? So I just want to address that question before we go any further, because there is a little bit of a view, and certainly I've come across it in the workplace, where people have said, oh, well, there's no point in doing that. Or in actual fact, if I encourage people, they'll often drop their standards and so forth. And I don't think there's any evidence of that, but I'll talk about it. I'm going to share with you some tools around how you could encourage to gain greater commitment. And these tools are not terribly difficult. They're simple things that you can do day to day, moment by moment, situation by situation, just in a corridor or at a meeting or wherever else. And I'm going to share with you Gallup's Q12, which is a 12 questions, and these 12 questions give you a chance to have a think about how engaging you are as a leader. And if you go onto the learning platform, you'll get a copy of those questions and you can answer them on the learning platform, and that'll be the homework for today. So 3 things we're getting from today, but I'll certainly address those questions with you today. All right, so here's a little statement I'd like to, a statement that I made in one of my previous publications, but I think it sort of sets the scene for what I'm trying to do today. And bear with me, I'm just going to read it through with you and then I'll talk a little bit about it. Some managers have the misguided belief that showing warmth, giving praise, and exhibiting a caring attitude will somehow adversely affect employee performance, that the team member will go soft, lose their edge, or lower their standards. Encouragement will more likely do the opposite if done genuinely, and that's a key word. Being supportive undoubtedly builds resilience, improves performance, and boosts effort. So I have seen no evidence that people who are encouraging in a genuine way will find that people's performance will drop off as a result of that. But for some strange reason, there are leaders that believe that, and it's not necessarily true. Now, I would say this to you, that it needs to be genuine. And of course, as you know from our very first session, I talked about authentic conversations. These conversations are supposed to be authentic. So in other words, if you're faking encouragement, people will see through it straight away, just like if you're faking anything else. You think you might be getting away with it, but you're not. So you need to have a genuine commitment to be encouraging to people, for that to have any impact whatsoever. All right, and I also should say this, that you're not encouraging people in order to extract more performance. What I would say to you is that encouragement will get a higher level of performance, but that's not your only reason for doing it. And if that's sort of a binary reason for doing it, that in itself will not be a good approach to take. All right, so I love this quote. Whoop, I went too far. Let me go back one. I love this quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and I think it's absolutely spot on when it comes to our whole notion of having conversations with people. And that is, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. It is so true. So you can have all the technical knowledge in the world, you can be the world's best engineer, or you can be the finest accountant, or whatever. At the end of the day, if people actually don't believe that you genuinely care for their well-being, then they're not interested in what you know. That's just the reality of it. And it's a good place to start this conversation in the engaging conversation. This is the key thing. So if you said to me, as a leader, you've got someone over here that's got high technical skills but doesn't care, and you've got someone over here that's got low technical skills and does care, who do you think is going to be the most effective as a leader? Well, I can tell you it'll be the person who has the high care factor that'll make the biggest difference. So this is something that unfortunately you can't learn in a Lunch and Learn series or anywhere else. You either care or you don't care, but you just need to be aware that if you might have sort of tried some of these techniques before and have got nowhere, maybe it might be because you're using them as techniques rather than a genuine effort to show an interest and concern and empathy for the people that you lead. So it is important to consider that question. Now, one of the best ways that you can show that you care, and it's just a simple 2 words that you can use, and that is thank you. It staggers me how many times people don't actually say thank you. And, you might say, oh, this is a little bit old-fashioned. Well, I don't think so, because it's all prefaced on courtesy. If you thank people, then you are actually, it's the ultimate form of empathy. In other words, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I appreciate what you've done and I want to express that appreciation. So get used to saying thank you more often. And I think if you do that, you'll be surprised at the impact that'll have. So thank you for speaking up at the meeting this morning. Thank you for staying back from work this afternoon for that hour to finish that report. Thank you for keeping your cool when you were talking to the customer the other day. All right. Thank you for taking the time to spend time with me today to talk about your issues. Anything at all is open for that. So get used to doing that. And if you said, well, I'm not going to give you any complicated things really during today's session, there's some simple things you can do. And one of those is to say thank you. Now, nobody, if you're worried that maybe I'm saying too many thank yous, I think it's fair to say no one's actually going to say to you, stop thanking me, you're doing it too often. It's not going to happen. So just get used to thanking people, and you'll find it's a simple thing to do, and you'll find it can go a long way in terms of showing it's an encouraging thing to do. So I think that might be something for you to take on board. Now, the other thing I strongly recommend that you do is instead of chipping away at people's weaknesses, work on their strengths. And if you're looking for a good read, if you haven't already read this book, it's an international bestseller. It's called StrengthsFinder 2.0 by Tom Rath. It's a fairly easy book to read. You could sort of read it virtually from a flight from one place to the other. It's a very short book. But the thing about the book is in the back there's a code, and you can take that code and go in and do the StrengthsFinder profile. And what the StrengthsFinder profile does is it identifies your top 5 strengths. And that in itself is a very interesting exercise. And the argument is that in your career and the work that you do generally, if you can exercise and utilize those strengths more than you currently are doing, you'll find you'll get great results from it. And the reason for that is a strength is an innate talent. It's something, we've all got. And really, it means that it's an effortless thing to be able to present that. Now, it may not be some grandiose thing. It could be just a sense of humor, or it could be, the ability to break things up into small bite-sized pieces and present them in a meaningful way. There's a whole bunch of things around that become really important. So get hold of the book. Now, the whole basis of strengths is founded on positive psychology, which has been around for a quarter of a century. And the issue around positive psychology is that people should be working on people's strengths as much as they should be on their weaknesses. And the argument is that these strengths, which are innate talents, are often not utilised because our society teaches us to work on our strengths. You come home from school, you present your report card to your parents, and you get 89% for English and 42% for maths. And of course, the first thing the parents are going to say is they're going to talk about the maths result. And so the English result is just bypassed, and therefore, it's obviously an innate talent. So if we had 100 hours to work on a strength and 100 hours to work on a weakness, where do you think you're going to get the best results? Well, you'll obviously get the best results working on a strength. So my suggestion is that to start working with people in your team on their strengths. Now, you might say to me, okay, I know the book's there and I can get the survey, but how do I find out what people's strengths are? Ask them. Now, don't ask them what their strengths are, because they're going to look at you in a very strange way. But here's the question. Here's the golden question. You ask people, what do you enjoy most about the work that you do? Just repeat that. What do you enjoy about the work? What do you enjoy the most about the work you do? Now, we do know from research that there's a high correlation between what people enjoy and what they're good at. So if you ask people what they enjoy about their work, hopefully they'll say something. But if they say something about that, then I can guarantee to you that what you've done is you've unearthed their strength without them realizing it. So, for example, they might say, well, I enjoy the interaction with the customers, or I enjoy working in teams, or I enjoy, the detailed work. I don't know what they're going to say to you, but if you ask them that question, you've unearthed that strength. Now, the next thing to do, once you've done that, of course, is to continue the conversation with them around how you might build on that strength. In other words, how might you help them or support them to exercise that strength more so in the workplace? Now, you might recall we looked at the 5 conversations framework in Unit 2, And you might recall that the second conversation was a strengths conversation. And we talked about doing that before we talked about opportunities for growth, because it creates an upward spiral of positivity. So the idea is to work on people's strengths. That can be encouraging because you're going to get great leverage from it. So if you can get people to exercise their strengths more at work, there's a couple of really interesting things that'll happen. One, they'll be happier, and two, they'll be more productive. Both of those things will be the case because they're innate talents that they're working on, so they naturally enjoy it. And because they are innate talents, they naturally feel comfortable exhibiting it. All right, so if you want more on that, go and get the book. You can get it in most good bookstores. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's a great read, and the philosophy's wonderful. And that would be a very good way of encouraging people by working on their strengths. But the simple question of, what do you enjoy most about the work that you do? All right. So that's another thing you can do. The other thing that I'd strongly recommend that you do is, and you'll notice the word there is gently challenge people. Don't accept mediocrity. And I think that, often people think, oh, well, if I push too hard, it'll get their back up. Actually, if you don't push too hard, nothing's going to change. But when I say push too hard, gently challenge people. So if somebody, for example, in a conversation with you says to you, oh, look, I don't think I can do this, or I don't think I've got the skill set, or whatever, then encourage them by saying, yes, I think you can. I just think you just need to apply yourself with my help, and I'm sure you'll achieve this. So encourage them by gently challenging them. Don't accept and write off what they're saying immediately, because I think the world that we live in, I think it's fair to say, I'm sure you'd agree, there's too much mediocrity around us. We need to strive for better results. Now, we as leaders need to strive for better results, but we need to also encourage our people, the people we lead, to strive for better results. Now, you might recall Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is the pyramid. And in that pyramid, Maslow identified several needs that people have to motivate them. And the most basic need is physiological needs: air, food, and water. All right, that's tick. We've got that sorted. The next need is safety needs. That is psychological and physical safety. Well, in most workplaces, tick, we've got that one. The next need we have is a need to belong. So making people feel that they belong to the team, and that's very important. But the next one up from there is that they need to feel important within the team. And the final one, that's the apex of the pyramid, is what Maslow calls at least self-actualization. And that people who are at that highest level of need in the workplace actually need challenge. Otherwise they leave, they get bored. So people who are highly, motivated actually need to be challenged. And if you as a leader fall into the trap of thinking because they're very motivated, I'm just not going to challenge them, you're making a big mistake. So gently challenge people is a way of actually encouraging people. You can still support them, but gently encourage them as well. So have a think about that. Don't accept second best. If you accept second best, you'll get second best. But I think you should always be striving and allowing others to stretch themselves to achieve the results that you know that they can probably achieve. So if you don't believe, it's a funny old thing, but if you don't believe in people, sometimes people will find it hard to believe in themselves. Sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's very true. Now, the most encouraging thing that you can do of all the things that I've run through so far today in our webinar is listening. Now, listening doesn't mean passively just sitting there nodding and staring into space. Listening means genuinely, actively listening. empathetically listening. That is, giving people your 100% undivided attention. And if you do that, it is the most affirming thing that you can do. Now, does that mean you've got to sit there and listen to a whole lot of waffle while people are, wanting to tell you all the problems that are going on in the workplace? Absolutely not. Why? Because that's a complete and utter waste of time. And you might recall when we went through the GROW model, and we talked about this notion that you'd only talk about the barriers that are getting in the way. All right. So listening doesn't mean sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, giving people your undivided attention when they're talking, just being negative. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a very practical application of this. So launch into a GROW model or a coaching model around that if it's important. But I think the key thing for you is to be assertive. So active listening would be this. So you would say to somebody, all right, look, apart from that, what else is concerning you at this stage? So that way you've cut off all of the other stuff and you've just got to the point. And look, another thing you can say to people, and people, human nature, I suppose, will often tell you all sorts of things. This is terrible. Senior management's terrible. You can hear all these things. But a very good question you can ask people is there anything that you and I can do about this? So if you say to people, is there anything that you and I can do about this? You've only got 3 answers really to that question. Yes, there is, or no, there isn't, or I don't know. And if the answer is yes, there is, well then, of course, you can talk about what you need to do to fix it. But a lot of times when people raise these things, the answer is actually no. All right. So if the answer is no, and you get them to say it's no, then you can actually then say, well, then it's probably best we just put that aside for the time being. In other words, what's the point of you sort of complaining and whinging and whining about something that you have no control over? You're just wasting your time. All right. It just, it's just not going to lead to anything constructive. So that way you can then confine the conversation to the key elements. And I know there's a school of thought that, people just want to sound off and that your job's there to be a sounding board. Well, to an extent, but we're all busy people, and I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be a counsellor sitting there for hours on end listening to people's problems, unless, of course, the problems are problems that can be fixed, and there's a willingness on the part of the person to fix the problem with your support, then go for your life. That's fine. But if it's just whinging about something for the sake of it, I cannot see how that's benefiting them or you, to be quite honest. So, have a think about that one. So, folks, we're almost halfway through. Well, we're probably a bit further than that. Does anyone got any questions or any comments or any observations that they'd like to share? Anything that I've said that you might want to challenge, or is there any observations you've got, generally speaking, about conversations and encouraging people? Just while you're sort of gathering your thoughts on that, look, you might say, well, look, I've got a person in my team and I don't think there's anything that I can do to get more commitment from them. Look, I think the law of averages, there may well be, if you've got, say, 6 or 7 people that you're leading, it's likely one of them's going to be just difficult. But the important thing is that there are others that aren't, and so, you've got to work with the energy. But one of the things you can do is ask people for their commitment. And I think one of the best things that you can do is just say, once you just look the person in the eye and just say, can I get your commitment? Can I get your commitment? That's not aggressive. It's not an unreasonable thing to ask. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that what you want? Don't you want their commitment? And if you do want their commitment, why don't you ask for it? Now, if you ask for people's commitment, there might be a nod or a grunt or even a yes. And that's good, because if you get a nod or a grunt or a yes, then they have committed, and the chances of them not committing have gone down dramatically. In other words, it's likely that they're going to get it done. Other than that, if you don't ask the question, can I get your commitment, it's likely that you're going to be wondering whether you are going to get their commitment. Why would you want to be wondering about that? And of course, if they say, no, you can't, no, I can't give you that commitment, or they make words, they give you a response that adds up to that, then you have another conversation with them about why. Because obviously, obviously there's something there that's preventing them from committing. So why? What is it? So ask people for their commitment could be a very useful thing to do. Now, David Rock uses the SCARF model when he's talking about dealing with change and threat. And I think it's a great little framework when you think about what we're trying to do in the workplace to encourage people. And I think, while I'm going through this, you might like to just evaluate your own workplace and think about, how many of these things are actually in play. Now, of course, some of these things are out of your control, but at the end of the day, how many boxes could you tick? The argument is the more boxes you can tick here around SCARF, the more likely it is that people are going to feel psychologically safe and encouraged at work. So the S stands for status, broadening the way status is defined, not only hierarchically. So the question that I have for you is, do people feel important in your team? Now, I don't mean they've got a fancy title or something, but do they feel important? Do they feel their opinion counts? Do you call upon them in team meetings to give their feedback and to make a comment? So, for example, we've all got quiet people in our meetings, and we've also got people we can't shut up. But the ones that are quiet, do you actually ask them for their opinion? Nothing wrong with that. They can always say, no, I don't have a view. But once you finish something, you can just say, John, have you got a comment that you want to make about what I've just said? Now, first of all, John's going to be awake. He may say, no, I don't. No problem, he's off the hook. But everyone else in that team meeting will know very well that you're likely at any stage to call upon them to give a comment. And that being the case, then people feel a little bit more comfortable giving their comment before they're asked. So it gets a little bit more engagement going on in team meetings. The C stands for certainty. That is aligning reality and actions. Now, we're living in an uncertain world at the moment, obviously, and that's adding a whole layer of stress to everybody's life. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. We know that. But in your own workplace, the more you can sort of keep a degree of certainty, the more likely you are to be creating an environment that people will find non-threatening. So having your meetings at the same time each week, having processes and systems and procedures to do things, all of these things, making sure that your mood's not up and down each day, that you bring your best self to work every day. All of these things add to certainty, and people want certainty. They crave certainty in their life. And when they come to work and they spend a chunk of their time in the workplace, they want to feel that degree of certainty as well. Now, A stands for autonomy. Now, autonomy is important because people need to feel as if they have some control over the work that they do. So they have some freedom to make decisions about what's important and what isn't. And so autonomy is very, very important. Obviously, you can't just give everyone a free rein to do whatever they want. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about. But within the constraints of the work that people do, are you giving them the sense of autonomy to make decisions about how they might go about things? And so that in itself is important. The antithesis of autonomy, of course, is being micromanaged. And if you've ever been micromanaged, you'd know that it's not a particularly pleasant experience. The R stands for relationship, and that is, of course, you building a constructive working relationship up with the persons that you lead. Now, we've talked a fair bit about that in the Lunch and Learn series so far, but of course, it is important in terms of creating an environment that is encouraging. So, and of course, we're not talking about having best friends necessarily. This is really about a good, productive working relationship. So R stands for relationship, and F is fairness. In other words, you're dealing with people in a transparent and fair way. And of course, we often make mistakes around that. And when mistakes are made, then we can then, you know, look at those mistakes and apologise for those mistakes when they're made. So this is a very good process, sort of to remind yourself that status, certainty, um, autonomy, relationships, and fairness are critically important to creating the environment by which you can get the best from other people. So you might want to just give that some thought. I think this is in your learning platform, and you can have another look at these a little later. All right, now I just wanted to finish up today talking about Gallup, and Gallup came up with 12 questions around engagement, and it's a great little survey actually, and I'd actually like you to do the survey. We don't have enough time to be doing it now, but these 12 questions are up on the learning platform, and your homework is to go and genuinely answer each of these questions, because these questions will determine to the extent to which you are creating an environment of encouragement and commitment. So let's have a look at them. Whoops, went too far. Okay, let's have a look at each one. And these aren't necessarily in order, so it's not like, the first question's the most important. They're all important in terms of creating the environment you're trying to. Do team members know what's expected of them in their work? Now, of course, a lot of that's their responsibility, but also some of it, of course, is yours. So do people actually really know what's expected of them? That's, obviously, if you don't know what you're doing and you're out of your depths, then it's hardly likely to lead to an engaging environment. Do people have the materials and equipment they need to do their job? And of course, everybody's, aware of cutbacks and budget constraints, and particularly in the environment we're in. Everyone's aware of that to a certain extent. But if people don't have the basic materials and equipment that they need to do their work, research shows clearly that they're likely to be disengaged. So making sure people have got what they need in order to do the job that they do is critically important to what they do. Now, you might say some of these things are out of my control, but whether they're in your control or out of your control, the reality is they're affecting the engagement levels in your team. So that's definitely something that will resonate. Can team members apply their strengths at work? There you are. So what I'm suggesting is that you perhaps have a strength-based conversation with people and you identify what the things are that they enjoy, and what you try and do there is you emphasize them to the best of your ability, because if you do that, you're likely to get a reasonably good result as such. Question 4, in the last 7 days, have you recognized or praised team members for having done good work? Now, positive reinforcement is extremely important. And remember, there's a simple way which has 2 words to it that can easily go into recognizing and praising, and that's thank you. So when you see people doing it right and you thank people, you will get you'll get a little boost of energy coming from the other person as a result of that. They may not show it on their face, and you don't hang around looking for it, but at the end of the day, people want to know that you recognize good work when it happens and you praise people. So it's not around going around and praising mediocrity, but when people go out of their way and they exceed your expectations in the work that they're doing, then they deserve to be recognized for that and thanked for that. So there's a question for you. Are you doing that on a regular basis? A very simple thing that you can do is look for 3 things that are going right every day and praise that. Can make a huge difference in morale in your team. Number 5, that should be do you care? That should be, do you care about team members as a person, as a human being? Sorry about that. There's a typo there. It may well be a typo actually in the learning platform too. But anyway, it's do you care about people beyond the fact that they're an employee? Now, again, it's not about being best friends with people. That's clearly not what I'm talking about. But generally, do you care about them as human beings? Do you show some empathy? Are you aware? Do you ask questions? Do you show an interest in them outside work? Do you, without prying, it's good to know what other people do, and because that's the whole person that you're talking about. But some people are very private about those things, but at least they know whether you are interested in them as people. And as we saw from the quote earlier on, as Theodore Roosevelt said, people don't care how much you know until they know you care. So that becomes a critically important part of creating an engaged workplace. Do you encourage team members' development? Are you looking at always trying? This is not sending people off to training courses necessarily, although that could well be part of it. But it's around encouraging people to develop themselves, to coach them when you need to encourage them when you need to challenge them when you need to praise them when it's appropriate. All of those things lead to other people developing themselves, which is critically important, of course. Okay, number 7, do you listen and care about the opinions of others? This is again coming back, all these things are interrelated, and of course it comes back to listening. Do you listen? So look, you can disagree with someone and still listen. And I think some people, and unfortunately in the world we live in now, everyone's sort of, if people don't agree with my point of view, then they get very upset, which is disappointing. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can say to someone, look, I disagree with you fundamentally, but one of the things I picked up is that I didn't realize how passionately you felt about it, right? That's a compliment. You haven't agreed with them, but you've picked up on something they said, which you've been able to recognize. So listen and, ask people, what do you think? What's your opinion about this? Do you have a view about this? Do you think do you think we're going too far? All of these things are about listening. Number 8, do you convey the impression that people's job is important? Now, you might think that's a very strange thing to have. Remember, this isn't my survey, this is Gallup's, but you might think that's a very strange thing to have in the survey. But at the end of the day, if you think that some people's jobs are more important than others, and you demonstrate that, then the people whose jobs you perceive to be not as important are going to know that. Everybody has a role to play. I mean, there wouldn't be a job there. Of course, some skills have higher skills than others. So in that sense, they're different. But one job is not necessarily more important than another. Have you ever thought about that? It's true. So everybody has the same sort of importance because they wouldn't have a job otherwise. But of course, some jobs have a higher skill set than others, no doubt. Number 9, are my co-workers committed to doing quality work? Now, a lot of that, of course, is going to very much depend on the team you've got and how you treat them and all the rest of it. But it's an important thing to think about. And I guess the good news for you is if you apply a lot of the things that we're talking about here today, and also in the Lunch and Learn series generally, you will improve the commitment in your team. Be patient, it takes time. You'll always have one or two you'll never change, but all we're looking for is a majority, a majority of people moving in the right direction. So be patient. But the other scary thing about this is until you change, nothing changes. So as a leader, it starts with you to be changing the views and the way other people do their work. So critically important. Number 10, do team members have friends at work? Now, it's not imperative to have friends at work, but if you think about it, work is probably the most important social community that people have got, particularly during COVID-19, because, people are sort of, depends on where you live, of course, but people are often working in isolation. And so, the only time that they really interact with people on a regular basis are their colleagues at work. So, do your team members, are you cultivating a more social environment at work to allow those relationships to nurture? They don't, you can't force them to nurture, but you can create the right environment. So a social gathering, doing fun things is highly, highly underrated, particularly in the environment we're in right now. People want to have a bit of fun and they want to let off a bit of steam, and you as the leader can do that in your own way. Number 11 on the list, in the last 6 months, have I talked to each team member about their progress? Now, I've suggested to you in Unit 2 that you use the 5 Conversations framework to create a regular check-in environment with your team members. Many organisations are using this now as as a replacement of the performance review. But quite frankly, I think just using it as a check-in is the step in the right direction. So, and of course, if you're using the 5 Conversations framework and you're having regular check-ins, then it's likely, of course, well, not likely, you are actually sitting down talking to people about their progress. And question 12, have I sponsored in the last year opportunities at work to learn and grow? Have you actually looked at formal learning opportunities in your team to help people learn and grow? Because I think that's really important, and you can do that. All right. So there's the 12 statements or 12 questions, and the homework for you is to complete the survey online in the learning platform. And if you do that, it'll be very interesting to see what your results are. And of course, I'd encourage you to be in touch with me. The whole idea is to interact with me. I'm kind of like your coach, aren't I? I'm not directly involved in what you're doing, but I'd like to think that I can add some expertise, and that's part of the deal. So, folks, are there any questions that anyone's got that they'd like to ask at this point before we finish up? We'll finish up a bit early today. You're a quiet bunch today. Maybe it's because it's Friday. Who knows? Maybe I'm doing too much talking. Maybe that's what I should be doing. But if you've got any questions, then you're more than welcome to ask. All right, all good. So, folks, have a great weekend. Get into your learning platform as soon as possible, because if you leave it too late, what will happen is, oh, what was I doing? I can't even remember what the unit was about. So I'll send you out an email this afternoon prompting you to go into the learning platform, and I'll obviously have the recording completed by then as well. So I'll upload that, and then what I want you to do is to go in there and do some of the homework. And I think if you do that, it'll reinforce the learning, and that'll make a big difference. All right, so thanks everyone. Just before we finish up, next time we meet, we've got our final session, and thanks, Jade. I appreciate that. That's a little bit of recognition. Thank you. Our final session is on relationship building. You might think, well, heavens above, why would I be bothering about that? Well, I'll guarantee there's somebody in your workplace you don't have a good working relationship with, so that's why we're going to be covering that topic. So tune in for that. Complete the unit, And of course, we'll catch up in a fortnight. So thanks everyone, all the best, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you and goodbye.